Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. We're super excited to talk with you about something that we cannot escape these days, Gen AI in general, and the hype that we see out there in the market as it's connected to sales performance and all go to market. And how do we really understand the difference between the hype and the real impact that it's driving for customers? And I couldn't be joined by somebody who's more, in the weeds and understanding how this works with Aviso and Max Tarasevich, the SVP of Sales at Aviso. Max, how you doing today?
Hi, David. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this. There's been so much hype lately about AI and how it's connected to sales performance and how people are actually using it in the real world. And I know that this is something that you dive into every day with your customers at Aviso. And so we couldn't be speaking to a more advanced expert in this area.
Thank you. Too kind. But you're right. This is definitely top of mind for our customers. So GenAI has been a very popular topic. So excited to talk about what we learned and share what we have found so far.
You can't escape it. It's evolving so fast that we really need to understand how to actually translate this into sales results. And so today we're going to talk about sort of the big picture of how to apply AI in your sales performance improvement. And then some of the myths that we're seeing out there and how AI is being applied, especially in the go-to-market space. And then we really want to make this as interactive as possible. So as you're listening to the webinar and we talk about things that you're struggling with, please put questions into the chat box, and so that we can address those as we're talking through, and then also some time that we have at the end of the webinar. We want to make this as interactive and useful as possible. So keep those questions coming in. So before we start, got a quick poll. With all the hype that everyone is seeing out there in AI and how to apply it, we're running a quick poll. With the hype getting stronger, what's been on your mind as far as how do I apply AI to the sales process, and what are some of the challenges that you see out there? So do you think it's really going to free up your time or kind of turn you into a robot, basically? Can it help you to stand out as a top performer? Is too much reliance on it going to degrade my skills as a sales professional? Or I'll wait and see. I really am not convinced that AI can actually help. Or is it something completely different? So just setting the stage, take a minute. I think we got 30 seconds, and we'll see your thoughts on the poll as we guide the discussion. All the different aspects that people are struggling with. The top at 60% was all of the above. Okay. So you're a little bit skeptical on AI, if it can actually help you, if it's going to help you be a top performer, if it's truly going to deliver on the hype, basically all of the above. Okay. All right. So you came to the right place. So we can definitely dive in on that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we look at AI applied to sales tech in the work that we do with Tenbound, working with clients. So first and foremost, as you think about AI, you want to take it all the way back to formula. And if you've ever heard the term jobs to be done, and this was popularized by Clay Christensen, in breaking down the actual aspects of what you do on a daily basis as a sales rep. And so we probably have on the call today, you've got sales directors, sales managers, and individual sales reps. But there's a set of activities that you do every day that are essentially your job to be done. And if you essentially sit down and make a list of everything that you do on a daily basis, you can start to see that there's aspects that can be applied to AI today that can actually accelerate the performance, especially the things that you probably don't really enjoy very much doing. Example for SDRs. 5 years ago, SDRs mainly spent a lot of time doing research and trying to find phone numbers, trying to find names, trying to find email addresses. Apply AI, suddenly that research time is cut down to nothing. Sales reps preparing for a call. Again, 5 years ago, digging through 10K reports, digging through analyst calls, trying to understand what's going on at the company so that you can be solution oriented. AI can take care of a lot of that for you. And the list goes on, especially as you're thinking about how can it be applied to the executive team and the work that they have to do, and then also to individual sales reps. There's pieces of the puzzle that can be greatly accelerated, and performance can be improved by applying AI. So homework number 1, map out your jobs to be done and figure out where you can apply AI. Slight delay here. And I still have there it is. Okay, I got a slight delay. Okay. Aspect number 2 in applying AI is you have to remember the importance of the data that you're actually working with. If you think of AI as an accelerant of performance, if you're not using the correct data at the beginning, you're essentially speeding up poor performance. And as we used to call it, garbage in, garbage out. So instead of having only one wastebasket of garbage that's coming out the back end, now you're accelerating that, so you're creating 10 times as much garbage. And we see that right now, especially how people are applying AI to prospecting and outbound prospecting. So the promise of AI in this case was that we can make individual content for each and every prospect, but essentially what it ends up doing is by spamming or creating more messaging that's not relevant to prospects, it's just actually burning your brand. So you got to make sure that you spend the time at the beginning to get good data at the upfront, so that then you can accelerate that sales process using AI. You can't skip that step. And I think everyone on the call probably has been on the receiving end of AI prospecting that went wrong. And so now, if you think about it, if we're able to take AI and accelerate the process and eliminate some of the jobs to be done by giving it to AI, and we also have a clean data set that we can start to work off of, the organization of your sales team becomes different. In that, I'll just give you a very brief example. Again, 5 years ago, if you got some funding, you were putting together a team, you might need to hire 5 or 6 SDRs at the beginning of the go-to-market process, because they spend most of their time doing non-critical research projects. Basically, they're just trying to find phone numbers and emails. Now you're applying AI to that process. It's greatly accelerating it. You may need fewer SDRs on the team and more sales reps, for example, to handle the increased output. Now, in that case, instead of going out and hiring, 7 SDRs, 6 SDRs, and having them basically be a research organization, you hire one good, what we call a go-to-market engineer, who can connect all this AI and to make sure that the data is processing correctly, so you don't have that garbage in, garbage out. You have one great go-to-market engineer, and then you can very strategically hire maybe 2 or 3 SDRs to be able to handle the data flow that's happening and to run that process. Or maybe you could hire an additional sales rep to handle the additional output from the SDR team. So the organization is changing. And we see a lot of companies right now, especially AI first companies, that are getting funding. And instead of, again, going out and hiring a huge sales team, they hire one good go-to-market engineer or even an agency to handle their go-to-market engineering and get everything set up perfectly, and then add in sales reps and SDRs strategically. So I think those are some of the big picture trends that we're seeing out there in the market. Now, Max, you've done extensive studies and you've been working with customers to implement AI into their sales process. You've uncovered a few studies from McKinsey and HBR on some of the myths that people are seeing out there, and you're actually out talking to customers. What do you see happening in the market?
Yep, David, it's like you said, there is a lot of interest in GenAI these days. And this study that McKinsey and HBR did, it did resonate a lot because it's very much aligned with what we hear, with what we experience when we work with customers. And most of our customers are enterprise, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 customers. So what McKinsey and HBR did, they surveyed 4,000 people that have tried the GenAI to some extent, specifically for sales and marketing, go-to-market teams. And they asked, so what went well, what could have been done better? And they distilled these 5 myths. And these 5 myths are very much aligned with what we are hearing. So what we wanted to do today is go through each of those myths and share our learnings, our perspective on what we see in practice with our customers. And these 5 myths is what you're seeing on this page. So the first one is indeed a very popular one. And it's like you said, all of us, we have been on the receiving side of being targeted by a GenAI powered tool or even SDR when you get a message and it was not written by a human being, and you're not even sure if it was like 100% meant for you, but it feels like it's easy to generate a message, and therefore a lot of organizations, that's what they started doing. And therefore there is this conception that, well, GenAI, language models specifically, very good at generating emails, and therefore what you can do to use this technology most effectively is to focus on the top of the funnel, so lead generation, essentially. And it is a very popular use case, and it can be done, it can be very powerful if done correctly. But there is more that you can do. You can do account plans, you can help draft RFPs, you can have AI generate pre-meeting briefings for you. All of this applies. So for example, let's make it a little bit more concrete. Let's say I indeed wanted to use GenAI to generate a message to, let's say, to you, David. So let's see how easy it would be to do it. So if I go into the platform, let's say, let's say I'm an individual SDR or individual seller, could be commercial seller, it doesn't have to be an SDR. And I want to reach out to you, David. So you have been loaded into my system, so you are one of my targets. Normally, if I'm a good salesperson, I would go and spend some time maybe on your LinkedIn profile. Maybe if you posted something like articles, etc., I would analyze all that. If I'm a great salesperson, I would also take a look at what the company is doing and how things are going there, etc. So I would try and personalize my message as much as possible. So right now, AI can do a lot of this groundwork for me. I can see your personality profile, even though I don't know you in this scenario. I can see do's and don'ts for how I should be communicating with you if and when I get on the call with you. And then let's say I ask the system, based on everything you know about David, which could be quite a lot for a lot of people. It's just your LinkedIn profile, your activity on LinkedIn, what you're reacting to, and things like that. And then I will be able to see things like, okay, here's one email for David, and it will be hyper personalized. Here's another email for David, and it could focus on something else. So if the first email was more focused on, let's say, your professional career, then the second email could be focused on you being a soccer coach. You see what I mean? So in this scenario, I can use GenAI to help with this prep work. And then I can maybe fine tune the message if I really wanted to. And then I can run this campaign at scale. I can actually go as far as asking a system to generate the right sequence of these touches using multiple channels. So that's what a lot of people associate GenAI with, because that's very easy to do. But on the other hand, like I said, it does not have to be, we don't have to be limited only to the top of the funnel. So let's say I'm an enterprise seller. A lot of companies would ask me, hey, Max, you're working on this large account. What's your account plan? One of the customers that we work with, Fortune 200, they estimated that on average, a seller spends 30 hours, 30 per account, and they want the accounts to be more or less up to date all the time. So let's say you do it every 6 months. And then depending on how many accounts you have, let's say it's 5 to 10, if you're focused on really large accounts, this adds up, all these hours. And the reason you have to spend so much time is because you have multiple systems internally, and then you have multiple data sources externally, and it's a large company that you're targeting. This is a large account, so you have to bring all this information together. GenAI can do it for you. This is not top of the funnel. It could be one of your clients. You actually have multiple opportunities in play, but you still want to know what's going on with this company in terms of news coverage. Do they announce new expansions, or do they have a new head of sales, for example, which would be relevant for us? What happened in their earnings call, if this is a public company. If this is a private company, then what do we see in the news, in the industry press, or 10K report, email summary. For larger accounts, we probably have had some interactions with them, some conversations with them over email. So can this be summarized, and can this be distilled and generated, a report generated, so that I know, okay, this is what has been discussed so far. This is what resonated. This is what did not resonate. This is what the next steps were, so that I don't need to do this manually, especially if I'm new to the account, or especially if I have multiple people, like a solution engineer and my manager and maybe a product specialist who's involved with this account. So GenAI can save a lot of time in this respect. The same applies to my Zoom calls, WebEx calls, or Microsoft Teams calls. Like, I just physically don't have all the time that I need to go and listen through these conversations. By the way, I'm not part of those calls necessarily all the time. You know, like I said, there are multiple people involved on this account. So if AI can help me and summarize all this for me, and then help generate a smart account plan, that saves a lot of time. And for the account plan to be smart, the missing component would be training the system on what your company does. So we know which products our customers sell, which services they offer. We understand what has resonated so far with the account that they're interested in. We know what's going on with the account from the publicly available information perspective. So then we can map these two things together. And then we can come up with some ideas as to which products you should be positioning. And then, of course, we know based on your email and calendar activity whom you have access to on the account side and whom you ideally should be in front of to pitch your products. And we can put it all together, and then we can generate an account plan. And on the account plan, we can deliver it to you as a file, or we can deliver it to you as a dynamic account plan inside the application. so he can continue working on it from here. That's one example how you can use AI to help you beyond just focusing on the top of the funnel. Another example would be, let's say, a very popular example. I'm a rep, I have a meeting, and my manager is invited to this meeting. So what can I do to help prepare for this meeting? Let's say I'm a good rep, so I'm aware as to what's going on with this account. I'm aware what we should be discussing, but I need to help my manager to get ready for this meeting. So pre-meeting briefing document would be helpful. Here's whom you're meeting with. This is their personality profile. Here is the history of our relationship with this account so far. If we have multiple opportunities, great. Summary of communication, conversation so far. Next steps we have discussed. So my manager will be ready for this meeting in a few minutes, as opposed to me having to brief her and saying, hey, this is what happened. Don't get confused. But by the way, here's a few things to watch out for. All of this can be automated. So that was our myth number one. Myth number two.
And just, coming from a marketing background, you look at AI as purely top of the funnel. And you get caught in that myth because there's so much work to do in identifying the target accounts and the people that work at the accounts and then their contact information and getting all that. And you go, oh, I wish that, AI could just do that for me. But then you don't really realize that, okay, once you're in a sales cycle, there's so much more work to do. And that hours and hours of research that you needed to do in the past can now be offloaded quite a bit to AI using that. And also one thing you mentioned is the ability to give your sales manager more tools to do better coaching, because they're more up to date on the account situation, and they can ask better questions during those coaching calls that they have with their sales reps. So
right.
Yeah.
And to a large extent, this is where our individual biases and our individual experiences are driving it, because a lot of us have used, let's say, ChatGPT. So, it's very good at writing text or helping you rewrite messages, or maybe use some other language model to help you with that. But this does not mean that in the B2B space, you're limited, specifically for sales, you're limited only to writing outbound prospecting emails. You can do so much more with this technology.
And I'll let you move on, but we've all been in those situations where you're a sales rep and you're meeting with your manager and they're like, hey, what's going on with XYZ company? And it's like, I have to explain this over and over to this guy. There's no.
I have never been in a situation like this. All my managers have been great, for the record.
Okay. That never happens to you, but it's happened to me.
No.
So this really, really helps.
Yeah, and it saves time, and you don't need to get this phone call from your manager and like you feel like you're wasting time. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Myth number two. Typically, when people think AI, Gen AI specifically, what comes to mind is like, oh, you need a lot of transactions. So banking, retail seems like a good starting point, because they have large consumer bases and therefore a lot of transactions, and therefore AI should make sense. What McKinsey and HBR found, in fact, B2B context is very, very good for using Gen AI. And that applies to larger deals, and that applies to enterprise sales, because Gen AI can help you with knowledge management. It can help you with large scale data processing, all of that. You obviously will have less data by definition, but you still have a lot of data. Think about a typical B2B context. You have a salesperson, you probably have a sales manager who is involved at least at some point in this deal, maybe one or two other people. And then you have them interacting with the customer over email. They probably have some meetings on their calendars. They probably have had some Zoom calls or Teams calls or WebEx calls. Maybe they have some kind of a digital space where they discuss strategy, or where they at least leave their comments as to what they think is the next steps should be in terms of like strategy. And and what they plan on doing next. So if you were to look at all those at all those signals holistically, then you would get a more comprehensive picture as if compared to what would happen if you just isolated one of the sources of data. Because no source data is perfect by itself, but if you look at all those signals holistically, this becomes a proxy for this conversation that we just talked about between the AE and the manager. Because the manager will be asking very basic questions, and what he or she will get in response is going to be an AE's perspective, which could be biased, but it would be a perspective, the only perspective that will be available for the manager. So what if this perspective could be augmented by, let's say, GenAI? So, and let me give you an example. So let's say I have some deals that my team is working on, strictly B2B deals. So it's not a B2C scenario where you have lots of data. So we're talking about a realistic scenario that McKinsey has identified. So what I could do is I could say, okay, this Aviso or any other system that you're using, based on everything you know about this deal, tell me how well was the AE able to position Aviso. I don't need millions of transactions to be able to get an answer to my question. This would be a normal question actually for a sales manager to ask to an AE who is really self-aware and would be able to say, look, here's where I did great, here's what I missed. Assuming the AE, of course, knows everything that they were supposed to mention as part of their pitch, as part of their strategy. So what happens here is AI does this job for you. AI reads emails, AI listens to calls, and then distills what happened there. And the AI can be trained in this scenario on your sales pitches, on your enablement materials. So we know what good looks like in terms of what you're supposed to be pitching, which case studies, which value proposition you should be highlighting, all of it. And then it's fairly easy for AI to compare the two and say, well, this is what they really pitched, and this is what you thought they would pitch based on what you prioritize for the team. So you don't need too much data in this scenario. This is just emails, phone calls, customer calls, and maybe some notes in your CRM system if you have those. This is how you will get this data from a GenAI system.
Well, it's such an advancement. A lot of sales coaching and management was very gut reaction. Like, does this AE really understand our value proposition? Are they doing a good job in explaining what we do and handling customers? And you really had to guess. I mean, it was a relationship with the sales manager and the AE. Now you can actually have scientific evidence to know, where are their strengths and weaknesses and how can I help them improve?
Yeah, and we know, statistically speaking, AEs are more optimistic about their deals than managers are.
Yes.
It's a fact,
right?
Yeah, it's a fact. And we know it because we have to predict which deals will close and not close. Yeah. And we end up being 2 to 3 times more accurate than human judgment. But we can compare our accuracy to the judgment of AEs versus what the manager thinks. So we see the managers are a little more accurate than AEs. So put yourself in the shoes of a manager. When you ask a question like, hey, Max, how do you think this conversation went? Or, Max, are you sure you have pitched or you have positioned everything you should have positioned so far in the sales cycle? Like, my natural inclination would be to say, yeah, I think I have all the bases covered. And then when you go to your GenAI system, and then you ask those questions to the system, then the system will not have any biases in this respect. So the system will go, well, this is what I'm seeing. Maybe Max had some other meetings like over lunch and he made a perfect pitch that I am not aware of. But based on what I see, here's what's happening with this deal. And you can ask all kinds of questions like, who is involved, who is not involved, who is engaged, who is not engaged on the other side, for example, and what resonated with them, what did not resonate with them. And this could be a good basis for the conversation. And this is how you as a manager could start adding value, even when your data set is limited and when your data set is imperfect. because we're saving you so much time, because you will have to spend this time on these basic questions. Otherwise, it's like, okay, Max, have you discussed, what we do? Have you actually explained that we have done this for company A, B, and C, and this is exactly what this prospect is looking for? Like, you can skip all of that.
Yeah.
Saves time.
The efficiency is.
Yeah. Okay. This is probably one of my. So I have two favorite myths on this list. So this is my second favorite.
Like enterprise.
A lot of people who have tried, a lot of companies and that have tried GenAI, they associate GenAI with chat interface, where you can ask some kind of basic questions and the system will just provide some answers, and those answers would be very basic, and by the way, they will hallucinate, the system will hallucinate to a large extent. So this is the limit, essentially, in a realistic B2B context, especially in sales where hallucinations are not acceptable. In reality, so what we're seeing is happening is, and this is where our approach has been different from day one. We're not just relying on GenAI alone, because you're right. Hallucinations are impossible to eliminate. And people, of course, people will say, well, RAG and other technologies will help you reduce that. Yes, but the hallucinations will not go away. Salesforce actually did a very interesting study. They shared it about 5 months ago, I think. Their AI research lab ran an experiment. So they used state-of-the-art LLMs, and they gave access to a CRM instance to each of those LLMs, and they asked LLMs to perform some standard CRM tasks. Go fetch this information for me, like which of the last 3 quarters had the highest sales for product X. Something as simple as that. Can you guess what the success rate of those commands was? What's your best guess?
I want to say something low, like
55%.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's higher
55%.
than yeah, that's not bad.
If you put yourself in the shoes of a practitioner, like, you cannot use the system. If you ask the system to do something and and the system will return a number, and the system will be very confident and will say, Max, that's the answer.
50%.
And you're 55% accurate with this answer.
Not good.
It's not exactly acceptable, right? Yeah. So what we're doing instead is we have built a so-called compound system. So it combines GenAI, and meaning like agents, of course, and classical non-GenAI AI, non-generative AI, meaning machine learning, that we had for many years since the very beginning. When we want to generate a prediction as to what's going to happen with the deal, we want to be fairly accurate. There is no room for hallucination. We want to be as accurate as possible. We know we're not going to be 100% accurate, but I want to be, let's say, 85, 90% accurate early in the quarter at the deal level. I cannot have a GenAI come up with something that's like 55% accurate, but I do want to have a GenAI component in some parts of the system where, let's say, I can query a system, I can have a system summarize an email for me, summarize the conversation for me, or extract some information from the conversation. We can do that. But when we combine both, this non-generative AI and generative AI, this is where you get the best. This is where you get the best results. And then you can have an orchestrator that will manage the system, manage different agents. And by the way, when I say agents, I don't mean agency in the true philosophical sense of this world, like, they have their own mind and we're talking about AGI. No, what I mean is just applications that can run fairly independently in the background with minimal prompting from you. So let's say an account plan that I showed you, you will have 8, 9 agents in the background doing their things, but they're still controlled by a central orchestrator who tells them what to do. And they're just doing it more or less independently, but it's not like they're ready to rival human intelligence, of course. That's not what I'm saying. But when you combine this Gen AI component and the non-generative AI component, then you get the best of both worlds. You eliminate hallucination for the parts where you cannot tolerate them, absolutely not. But you get the human-like experience where you can actually talk to the system and then you can ask questions. And that's what we do with our Gen AI chief of staff, Mickey. So Mickey can answer questions about your business, about individual deals or some trends, etc. But since Mickey is based on this non-generative AI foundation, then Mickey does not suffer from this hallucination that is so prevalent. And that's why the myth persists that you cannot use GenAI for anything that is complex. And then from here, you can take it into any direction. So let's say one of the issues that modern sales team have is overload of information. Like if I showed you even our system, you see how many modules it has. It's like, wow, you can spend a lot of time here if you wanted to go through like each tab. So what we do is we made it easier for teams. There's this concept of cadences where, let's say, if I'm a first line manager, I have my rep that is on my team, and I want to have a conversation with them. And let's say this is a standard conversation, it's part of our process, and we just want to talk about their business. So it's a business overview, or it's a pipeline inspection, however you want to call it. And typically we cover 5 things, let's say. It depends on your process, depends on your methodology, of course. But nothing prevents modern systems from being configured so that you can have this easy button where you just click on it and you say, okay, walk me through this conversation so that I don't need to go to different parts of the platform. Just give me the insights that I expect from a modern AI platform. Just make it easy for me to digest and for my rep to digest. So here's the deals that slipped. You want to go from here to, let's say, pipeline trends and forecasting, or you want to talk about engagement gaps, not a problem. So you can navigate your conversation from here, and you will be using GenAI, non-GenAI components. You don't have to know where this information is coming from or how it was put together, unless you're really interested to, and then you can go and navigate to the right place in the platform. That's how sophisticated these systems can be. So these workflows, these cadences, or the GenAI chief of staff, they should be able to help you get more value than just a chat box. And by the way, when people talk about value, like, you don't have to solve the world hunger from day one. Think about small things like, do your reps do something today that is manual and should not be manual in the current environment? Let's say update next steps after their conversations, update, I don't know, MEDPIC fields from scratch in your CRM, even though they just had a conversation with someone where they clearly talked about, I don't know, metrics, for example. Like, there must be something that the system will offer as a starting point and say, hey, this is what you discussed. It looks like these 2 metrics are important to your customer. Anything you would like to add? This is a much better starting point than saying, well, look, here's a field, it's blank. Please enter metrics that you have captured from your client so far. So you can start with simple things like this. Myth number 4, that's probably my favorite. So number 1 on my list. Our data is not perfect. We are not ready. Therefore, we have to wait. And this applies, by the way, to GenAI. It applies to, let's call it, traditional classical AI, and even before AI, that was the case. All right. So what happens here is, we do not expect our customers to have perfect data. And by the way, I think expecting that your unstructured data will magically become structured after you finish your 3-year program to clean up data and transform data, I think that's a little unrealistic in many scenarios. So what we do instead is we work with both structured and unstructured data. And we want to augment your decision process to the extent as possible. If the data is absolutely horrible today, and you're right in this assumption, then your teams have no insights as a starting point. So whatever we do will still be better than them waiting for this program that will take 3 years to be over. If your data is actually much better, which usually is the case than you assume, then they will get deeper insights than they're getting today. Because what's happening right now is there's concept of wave number 4 when it comes to sales stack. Wave number 1 was systems of record. So the 80s, I don't know, early 90s, CRM, ERP, human capital system. You have tables where you're supposed to enter all the structured information that is required for the business, and then you will be able to unlock insights. Unfortunately, the insights kind of did not materialize to the extent they were promised. So then the solution was systems of engagement. How about we have a chat or a UI that is slightly different, so it will be easier for people to collaborate and maybe work with those systems. And Slack, Zoom helped us collaborate. But the problem that they created is your structured data still does not follow your human process. And by the way, humans generate a lot of unstructured data. So the systems of intelligence appeared like, oh, we will take care of generating insights from your systems. But again, those insights are limited because a lot of this unstructured data was not processed until today, when you have these agents that can actually take care of a lot of those things. Like I said, it's not enough by itself. My recommendation is use both classical AI and GenAI together, then it becomes much more powerful. But to me, this wave 4 is the most powerful of all the ways that we have seen so far. So. And finally, GenAI takes too long to implement. McKinsey and HBR said, in fact, you should expect months, if not weeks, for simpler use cases. And here, selecting the use case is really important because you want to be as specific as possible in terms of like, what are you trying to accomplish? Because this will determine how you actually will be measuring the impact, because this is a popular question. Okay, we do something, how do we measure it? Well, measurements should be discussed before you get started, because which use cases and how you get started and how long will determine which measurements are actually realistic. Because if you're doing something like, okay, let's try it and save people time, then that's one thing. If you want to improve their productivity by making them more successful in terms of win rates or shortening sales cycles and all of that, that's another thing. It will dictate what you're measuring. But in our experience, and it's aligned with what you see in industry reports, 20% plus improvement when it comes to sales productivity with the latest AI technology is absolutely feasible. And we have demonstrated things like this in 6 weeks for larger companies, Fortune 500. It could be as quick as a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks for simpler scenarios. To me, what's important is you want to be very clear on the timeline. You want to be very clear on what's in scope, what's not in scope, and agree upfront how you're going to measure this. Because if you look at any report as to what people wish they could have done better, 2 things pop up as number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is governance, so better governance for an AI program. Number 2, faster learning, meaning like we should have experimented more, we should have pivoted better faster in our programs. And we see that a lot because companies learn what works for them, what doesn't work for them, what data is actually good, what data is actually bad, all of that. So if you can be fast with this, then that is something that you can benefit from significantly. All right, I think, and that's all I had. Do we have any questions?
We did have some questions from Frank. How do you measure the effectiveness of AI in the sales process over the initial months of the implementation? Maybe as you've been working with some of your customers, how do you measure the success or failure, I guess?
So the best customers I have worked with, they're very transparent about it upfront. What's realistic to measure in month 1? Let's say if you tell me I want to measure win rates and it's a large enterprise team that we're working with, and they have long sales cycles for the deals that they're working on, I don't think this is realistic. But if you want to measure, let's say, how much time they will save by, I don't know, having account plans generated automatically for them, or for not having to record next steps manually after the calls, you can measure that for sure. It really depends on the use case. It depends on the timeline. And it also depends on what the company is interested in. Not every company is, like sometimes people tell me, look, I don't care about how much time we free up for sellers for all kinds of reasons, but they care about some other things. Some people care about the number of activities and what kind of meetings they have. So if that's what you care about, then this is what we should be measuring.
Got it. And Jason was asking, are we okay on time? I Do we just have a couple more minutes?
I can stay longer.
I got a couple more questions. Jason's just asking, there's hallucinations and LLMs can be error prone. How do you make sure that you're as close as you can to accuracy when you're using AI?
So first of all, hallucination is very natural. So it's almost a feature of Gen AI, and you know what I mean, right? So it's not intended as a consequence, but it exists because it's probabilistic in nature. So with probabilities, you can get it wrong. So Gen AI can give you a fantastic answer, or it can give you an answer that will be absolutely ridiculous. One of the researchers compared it to a box of chocolate. You can reach inside, but you don't know if the chocolate that you are going to have is going to be good or not, because it's a variety of chocolates there. So if you're lucky, you will get a fantastic answer. If you're not as lucky, you'll get a bad answer. So to me, if you're just relying on Gen AI, it's a bit of a risk. What you can do is, if that's your strategy, limit it to use cases where you can have human supervision before any activity takes place that's important. Like, for example, if you're sending an important email, you want to review it before it goes out. If you have an account plan that was purely Gen AI generated, review it before you send it to your manager. What we do is, like I said, we combine Gen AI and non-generative AI. So for the important things like calculations of probabilities or key metrics, etc., we use classical AI that does it for us. And a lot of data that we play with is already tagged inside of Aviso. So it's much easier for the Gen AI component to work with it afterwards. We do not rely on Gen AI for computational things because they're not built for computation. If you want to rewrite a message, if you want a summary of your message, that's what Gen AI was built for, but not to compute probabilities of your deal to close.
Got it. And we got a lot of great questions. We'll be sure to get back to everybody on this. Ken Smith, I don't know if this is the Ken Smith that I work with sometimes on market maps, but hey, Ken, if not, it's good to see you here on the webinar. Ken's asking about ensuring data security when you're applying this, because you've got all this really important, private data in your system. Yeah. How do you make sure that it doesn't get leaked?
That's extremely important. Again, if your approach is, let's just take an LLM, unleash it on, let's say, my company's emails, chances are you will create a problem, and we have seen it even with larger companies when an email or multiple emails from the CEO start showing up in the wrong places, and people have access to them who are not supposed to have access to them. Why? Because LLMs do not have this security protocol, security logic built in them. They don't know which emails to ignore, and it's really hard to teach them. So what we do is we even before GenAI started, and we use the same structure for GenAI. So we are very strict in terms of permissions, who has access to what based on your role in the hierarchy. So we know what information you're supposed to see and what information you're not supposed to see. And this underlying structure persists also to the GenAI components. So it's physically impossible for the GenAI component to show you something if you don't have access to this data. GenAI simply on your behalf does not have access to this data. But if you flip it and you give GenAI access to the data first, and then you try to filter it, then it becomes tricky.
Yeah. Okay. And there's a couple more questions, but we'll just wrap things up. One last thing is there a good prompts, or is there a way that they can use GenAI to bring everything together? What are your thoughts on effective prompts?
One researcher described it in the enterprise context, specifically prompt and pray. I think that's very accurate. So depending on the tool that you're using, you'll probably get some guidance. I mean, this is the best practices in terms of prompting and all that. Again, if you're simply using an LLM, then when you prompt, be prepared for the prompt to return different results on different days, depending on what mood the LLM is at. So if you use something that's a compound system, so when the system is supposed to go and fetch data, not just by using the GenAI capabilities, so to say, but also by using something that has been pre-built by non-GenAI applications for the system, then the performance will be more stable. And then the exact way how you ask the question will be less important. But in general, I think we're getting to the point where is it realistic to train like a salesperson at scale to be good at prompting? I think we can try, but that's not easy. So,
well, we still need salespeople, even though we've got AI. So we still can add a lot of value. Maybe just not doing the boring, repetitious, things that nobody wants to do. They can actually spend more time.
Yeah. And look, the modern system, I would expect to learn. Like if you're prompting it with the same question more or less every day, then the system actually should learn and come to you and say, "Hey, Max, good morning. I probably know what you're going to ask. Here is a shortcut for you. Do you want to see this data so that I don't need to prompt it every time I log in?"
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Max, this has been so interesting. I mean, I think that the homework for everybody is go back and map out your job, all the different components that you have, and is there a place where AI can accelerate and add value? And get started from there because there's so many great opportunities. And then definitely check out Aviso and the capabilities that you've put together. This isn't sponsored or anything, but it looks like a really, really solid application. And it's a way to get into AI right at the beginning. So thank you for coming on, Max.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, David.